I'm going to crank a sock to match this one, which is a fairly tall sock I'm making for my son. Some socks with Lycra, and I thought I would just do one video and show how it's done from beginning to end. I start with every other needle out, and my landmarks for you to follow along so you know where the reference points are: 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 and 9, A, B, C, and D. And importantly, I refer to that needle quite a bit. This will be needle number 1 that I start and stop a lot of things on. So that's needle number 1. And we will now take the cast-on bonnet, which is a split ring bonnet. And I start with needle number 1. That really doesn't matter, but it's sort of a habit. Needle number 1. This is a 7/82 slot cylinder. So I've got to take that off there. Okay, 7/82 slot cylinder, so that means with every other needle out, I'm loading the remaining 36 needles that are still in place with the split ring bonnet. Go as far as I can. I like to get as far as I can, and then add some waste yarn. This is TAM acrylic waste yarn. Load it through my yarn topper and down through the ring light. Get the rest of the rings on the bonnet. Okay. Stack of weights. Stack of weights that has been dropped more than once, but easily fixed. Okay. I think that's plenty of the waste yarn. Snip it, pull it through so that it is just on the far side of needle number 1, and the needle number 1's latch is about to close. And then that is helpful because I'm going to put some ravel cord in. Ravel cord is very helpful to separate the project from the waste yarn. So beginning and ending on needle number 1. Again, the needle number 1's latch is about to close, so that's good. We'll grab our working yarn, which is over here, and I will try to get it to put it into my yarn tupper. Into the yarn carrier with about 4 inches to spare. I'm using this Lycra, which is cobweb Lycra, very stretchy Lycra, so that it gives it a better fit, I think, for socks. This sock should fit a wider range of people with Lycra in it. So I start the Lycra along with the blue yarn at needle number 1, which also happens to have the end of the ravel cord. Once I'm sure things look good, I crank forward 3/4 of a row, or a little more. we're going to do what's known as Juana's cast-on, which is a very sturdy, stretchy cast-on of 1x1 ribbing. Put my ribber assembly in. I'll temporarily move this out of the way while I'm loading needles. It's not going to be needed so close to the work. So I'm grabbing my little small needles. I'm adjusting the ribber a little bit. Grab the running loop of yarn between the cylinder needles and do an alley-oop. Some people would simply prefer maybe to put it in like this and then grab a pick tool and lift the yarn over like that, so that works too. I've been doing the alley-oop move for a while, so that's kind of how I'm stuck. But whatever works. There never seems to be a way to do it so that it's fast. Take your time on this because it's really easy to make a mistake. Most common would be that you do your alley-oop and then the latch ends up closing, which is a recipe for a drop stitch, of course. So be kind of careful with this if you can. All right. And then working on the opposite side of the machine is difficult. Okay, A, you can't really see as well, and B, you sometimes have to resort to using your non-dominant hand on parts of the sock. So there's a lot of considerations, a lot of places to make mistakes. The arm for the ribber dial gets kind of annoying. It's in a spot that makes it so you can't really place too many more needles. So for that reason, we'll have to start cranking forward. And don't go too far because you don't want to cover the tappet plate over where you're trying to insert needles. So that can happen. And I need to grab a few more needles from my pile over here. You ideally want to catch the Lycra in the same. You can catch the Lycra, but Lycra is very forgiving in that one way. And if you miss a loop of it, it'll be fine. There's a lot about Lycra that isn't forgiving, but this, if you inadvertently leave out the loop or the running Lycra bit, it would certainly not, it wouldn't matter at all. Where Lycra isn't very forgiving is when you have to undo a project that you've used Lycra in, and it's very sticky. It wants to stay attached to the yarn, so it's really hard to get apart. Some people don't even bother trying to remove Lycra from something they're undoing. They just leave it in, and I think there's some wisdom in that. I'm a little bit, I won't say OCD, but I spend the time. I'm retired, I can do it. I spend time. I remove the old Lycra from my work and start fresh with the yarn. But there may come a time when I get sick and tired of that, because it does take about, I would say about 5 or 10 minutes per inch of cranking. I don't know if that's accurate. That's just a wild guess, but it takes time to separate the old Lycra from the yarn. Okay, so I've added 36 ribber needles to the dial by grabbing the loop. This is needle number 1, cylinder needle number 1. What I'm going to do is continue cranking around until I'm sure every single of these ribber needles have knit. And then I'm going to take the ribber out of work by using this switch here. I'm going to put the ribber out of work for 2 rows and then put it back in work for the rest of the cuff. So the landmarks that I use for my machine, when this little peak, this little pointy thing, nope, I'm wrong. It's not that one. When this one, which you can't see from the camera angle, I'll show you in just a second. When this actually comes and kind of points at these 2 needles, the last ribber needle, well, actually, yeah, maybe it's the last cylinder needle and the last ribber needle, somewhere in here. When this little pointy thing points at these, I can take the ribber out of work. So here it comes. For my Legare machine, that little point is pointing at the last cylinder needle. And that helps me because what I want when I make this change to take the ribber out of work is I want these needles to stay in work like they were when they entered the tappet plate. But I want this ribber needle and the subsequent ones to tuck in or to stay tucked in. So what happens is when I take this out of work, these needles jut out, and that's exactly what I want to see. I want to see this last ribber needle push out because it wants to accept the yarn that it was promised, so to speak. So I'm going to, and sometimes it is hard to get started when, yeah, there's some, sometimes, I'm going to move that there. Okay, that, so I had to wiggle that because I couldn't really advance my yarn carrier for some reason. So with any luck, I should be able to go. Yes, so I'm able to go. And now the other ribber needles are not reporting for duty because they're out of work. So in the same fashion, I'm going to stop my tappet plate so that this point points at the last ribber needle. And I'm going to put the ribber needles back in work. All of these that are in the tappet plate were told they could take a day off, but I want that first one here to report for duty again. It was on hiatus. All right, so that's what's happened. Now I'm going to set my counter. To 24, which is a little bit of an odd number, but that's how I started these socks. I forgot to stop at 20, which is how I usually do, but I forgot, so I'm going to just make everything 24, make the cuffs 24 rows. So now what I'm doing is I'm swapping out, and again, this gets in my way, so I push it over here. I'm swapping out every other ribber needle, which will give me a 1x1, excuse me, a 1x3 rib for the leg. So we did 24 rows here. Now I'm swapping out to do 3x1 rib for the leg. And this also takes time. I'm using my spring rest here to help open up a space where it won't be hard to put the cylinder needles into work. It's kind of nice to have that. I think most machines have that. Some people don't use it, but I like it. All right, so now I'm going to reset my counter. I'm going to advance the yarn, advance the assembly forward so I can get to some more of these needles here. So I think this is called a handshake transfer, where you put the hooks together, open up the latches so that everything moves on from one needle onto another. So I went past the latch there, went past the latch for the cylinder needle, and I think we're good. Always kind of keep in mind that you can get off easily if you're not paying attention. So you see how a pattern develops here, where I've got 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. I also leave these replaced needles in the half knit position, so that means they're up about a quarter of an inch. The half knit position, all it means is that the latch is above the yarn, so it has to stay, the needle has to stay quite a bit higher than the other cylinder needles around it, because the other cylinder needles around these have their latches safely tucked under so they can knit. So when you replace a ribber needle with a cylinder needle, the loop of yarn is well under the latch, as you can see here. I'm going to put that down into the slot, but the yarn loop of yarn is now past the latch, which is to say that it won't knit. If I were to push it all the way down, that latch would come up, and there's no chance that this will knit. It'll drop off. So we leave it in the half knit position, and that resolves very quickly once it's knit. Now, if you're really unsure about it, I wouldn't recommend this, but if you didn't trust yourself to do this properly, I suppose one thing you could do is every time you replace a needle is to take the loop and make it look like all the other needles with the loop covering up the latch. That would work, but it takes time to do that, and it's not worth it. This half knit position is meant to take the place of resituating the stitch on the needle. And much easier to do, much more practical. Okay, so I'm done with that. That one can be down because I showed people how to put the loop over it, which I don't recommend. And making sure that everything that is up, all the needles that have been replaced are up a little bit. I started my yarn carrier over. Now I'm going to try to get 86 rows of leg. '82, '83, '84, '85, and now up to the top, 12 o'clock. An unusual place to begin and end anything is at 12 o'clock. Most of the time we stay at 6 o'clock so that the first needle that's affected is needle number 1. But in this case, I want all of this up here so that I can access these ribber needles, which I'm going to swap out, because this is going to be the preheel and eventually the sole of the sock. All right, so I stop at the top, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I won't be able to get to this one very easily. We'll have to advance the yarn carrier, but that's okay. I'm swapping out all of the needles, all of the ribber needles. There was one I just swapped out that was actually north of the halfway mark. You don't want to leave a needle, a ribber needle in work that's going to possibly interfere with the heel. So where there's a change in direction of the knitting, you can develop a hole and or kind of a stress area. So you want to swap out and only have solid stockinette in the vicinity of where the heel transitions into the foot. I don't know if that makes sense, but yes, these are no-brainers. We're going to take these out, but we're also going to swap out. Well, the last ribber needle is actually right at the hemisphere. And like I said, I can't really get to it, so I'm going to wait. So I've got all these. What I do all of those swaps, and then I need to put them in the cylinder, of course, cylinder slot. So I do the low-hanging fruit first. Easy peasy. Again, I'm leaving these in the half knit position, a little bit higher up. I can grab the cylinder spring with my fingers and make sure those get in there. And then I've got 2 more over here. Okay. I now want to reset my counter. I'm going to do 10. Well, this can't be reset quite yet because it's kind of being moved right at this point. So I'm going to wait on that. All right. I think I can safely put that back. Keeping in mind that I definitely need to still swap out 1 more needle. So I'll do that right now while I can, while it's on my mind. Using a pick tool to just pull out the spring, cylinder spring is good. Okay, now I think I can reset this. I've already done 1. That's where the action is right here. So this is starting the second row of 10 preheel rows. That's 10. The next step is to, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is leave this on and just take it out of work. Normally I take my ribber off. I park these and then I hang them on the inside. But you know what? I've been not needing to do that since I've been so lucky lately with not dropping stitches. Okay, so this is a new way for me, or I don't usually do it this way. I'm going to leave my ribber assembly on. It's faster, and people who do it are doing it because they absolutely hate taking these needles out, parking them, removing the ribber, taking these out of the cylinder spring, hanging them by their little necks, and da-da-da-da. So it's a little bit of a bother, especially when you try to get yarn back onto these for the top of the foot. All right, so I'm glad I remembered that this is an option for me. If you leave your ribber on the machine with these, they're out of work by removing this, the ribber stop pin. This is required for the ribber to keep moving around the top of the ribber dial. And we don't want it to. We don't want it to move right now. We're going to leave it in place. It should stay here. And I can proceed with my heel. I don't, the downside is you can't really see as well. You can't really see what's going on. If you do drop a stitch, it's terrible. But I've been kind of lucky lately since I demagnetized some needles, and I've been not dropping stitches lately. There, I just jinxed myself. All right, well, we're gonna give it a go. So I've raised all but 2 on this side and 2 on this side of the halfway marks. I'm going to do a slightly deeper heel here. And so we're going to do our decreases first. Now I do need to put my heel spring on, which is right up here. And I'm going to crank forward and lift a needle. So this thing stays in place. It's not knitting any stitches. It's kind of cool to do it this way because it's faster. What I'm doing now, underneath you can't really see, but I'm actually holding onto the knitting under and pushing it forward, so I'm providing some tension. And downward is important, but also forward or this direction so that I don't drop stitches. The more you're creating a cup in this area, the more fabric you have in this area, the less the weight is doing anything to help make stitches. All right, so I've already raised that one. And I can tell that I'm kind of tempting fate when I'm going to need to add my forks and springs. All right, so I'm lifting one at a time. These are all decreases here. The stitches are starting to not settle down onto the top of the cylinder. You can't really see that, but that is an indication that you need more weight, more local weight. Now the fact that I've left my ribber dial on, even though I took it out of work, it's still on. It does create a bit of a challenge, at least for me, in how you place these. You want the spikes facing forward, and if you take this assembly off, you can see it a little bit better. Well, this is just kind of a leap of faith. I'm going to try to grab on and hope that is it. Okay, so when I left off, I had lifted that. No, I hadn't lifted that needle, so I need to lift this needle. Okay, and I need to lift that one. And this, back and forth, we're doing our decreases. And we are getting down to the point where I'm going to reset my heel forks actually while I can. I'm going to lift this last one on this side. That's my last singleton. And here's my last singleton on the left side. And then I lift these two together. I'm starting to wonder if this is really worth it, but lifting those two together and lifting these two together is all to try to round out the toe a little bit. So by lifting these together and then putting them down together, in theory, I'm rounding this out so it's not quite as abrupt. I'm not sure that it really does. I made a mistake and didn't do it the other day, and it's like not much different. So the jury is out for me. Now I'm going to lower these two together. These were raised. Now I'm going to lower them together. And I do the same thing over here, lower these two together. And I joke that I need to sneak up on the latches when I do my increases. I hope I said that right. The previous set of stitches where we were raising needles was actually doing the decreases. Now we're going back out, we're increasing back out. And it's a little counterintuitive, but that's the deal. When you raise needles, you're decreasing. When you lower the needles, like I am now, I'm doing my increases. So you can hear my heel forks jingling, and I'm grabbing them to make sure that they're still hanging on. And actually, I might even help them pull the yarn down a little bit, the knitting down a little bit. So now they're riding up. And again, this is where, to me, it's a bit of a challenge to make sure that they're in the right place. And so, leap of faith, but that's okay. So these didn't ride down too well. Let's pull them. There we go. My preferred way of cranking heels is with the ribber off, but this is kind of fun to do again to show how it's done. And most people kind of want to see where they're going. It's sort of like using autopilot. You have to trust that you'll be able to sense if something's wrong. All right, we're getting, so again, the knitting is not sitting where it should, but I think I can adapt to that by pulling it down. And we are closing in on the end of the increases. We're closing in on the end of our heel. And I'm going to point something out for folks. When we started this heel, I took all of these needles out of work, but I left these two in work on this side and these two in work on this side. Now that I'm doing my increases, in order to avoid a hole, I'm going to simply lower this one. That'll be the last one on that side. And I'm going to lower this one. It'll be the last one on that side. Okay, so this needle and this needle will never be put back into work for the heel. Of course, they need to be put back into work for the foot, but not for the heel. So now we can start the foot. I'm lowering these down, and again, they are in the half knit position so that the latches can do their job. I like to say they're given a fighting chance if they're raised up a little bit above the where the other ones would be compared to the other ones. All right, most importantly, I need to take my ribber stop tool, or what do they call that thing, to get my tappet plate to now rotate the way it's supposed to for the foot. So we should be off to the races now. We did a heel, we did a pre-heel, well, so let's review. We did Juana's cast on with 2 out rows, 24 rows, odd number, of 1x1 ribbing, 86 rows, believe it or not, of 3x1, 10 rows of pre-heel, where I took out the needles in the back and left the ones in the front. We just finished the heel, and now we're going to start about right here for the foot. I'm going to do 85 rows for the foot. Making sure that's in. I'm going to take my heel spring off. I sometimes leave it on for people with narrow feet, but that does not describe my son, so he doesn't need any extra room. Well, he does need extra room, actually, so I don't want to tighten the fabric too much. Okay, I started my counter over. Everything looks good. So now, that first row is a little scary because, again, you have to sort of make sure that those knit, and they look like they did. Okay, my weight stack has bottomed out. So I need to put a tool, let's see, this thing on. I'm going to start it with the knitting right here and attach the weights after I flip it over. Okay, I flipped it over. You can't really see, but that's what I've done. And now I've got a pretty good situation. I'm at 64, so I'm not near where I need to be. But what I'm going to do is remove these heel forks and place this tool, replace it, so that it's above the heel, so that I'm capturing the fabric where the weight stack will impact the whole sock. I'm not sure I said that right, but once the heel is low enough under this cylinder, I can actually include it underneath that, that weight stack so that everything is even. So I don't need these right now. So I'm at 64, so I need to crank 20 more rows. '83, '84. Now we're almost done. We're going to start a toe. Move that out of the way while I work. I'm going to start a toe, and to finish a toe, there's a row of Kitchener or grafting stitches that has to be done. So what I like, and most people I think would agree, grafting a toe with some ribber needles or purl stitches and some knit stitches is not as easy as grafting stitches that are all stockinette. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to swap out all of these needles and I'm going to crank one more row on the machine and then start a toe. And we'll also be able to see our work once I remove the ribber assembly. So doing the same thing where I swap out everything. It's easy to forget one little ribber needle back in here underneath the arm of the ribber. Okay, so I've replaced them. Now I gotta sit them down into the cylinder slots, half knit position, and kind of hold the spring out so I can get these last few ones in here. That one, last one's a little tricky. Take off my ribber, put it in a place where it won't get into mischief, and it's a nice looking sock so far. It looks huge, but I think it'll block in a way that it won't be quite so big. Put the spring back, half knit, half knit, half knit position for these to do their job. I'm going to go one time around. And now I am going to lift the back half of the needles out of work to crank a toe. So we want to be kind of careful about this. Sometimes it's very bad if you were to, say, leave one and work like that. Maybe you missed it for some reason. It knits, it will knit, and then sometimes it's a problem. You have to tink back or, heaven forbid, start the sock over, which I definitely don't want to do. All right, so here's my red mark for halfway here and here. Needle number 1 is out of work, as are all of these, and these 36 needles are in work. I will put the heel spring back on. In this case, it's a toe spring, I guess. And I will start cranking a toe. Lift a needle, crank a row. Lift a needle, crank a row. One by one, we're lifting the needle because we're doing some decreases. And you can see these are not settling down, so I'm tempting fate by not using my heel forks. So let's get those heel forks right now. I put one in the middle and one on either side. So these just add weight to the pocket that we're building, which is the toe. All right. Need to lift that needle. Okay, and we are getting to a point where we'll do a rounded toe again, just like we did the heel. So that's the last single one over there, and here's the last single one on the left. Now, good time to swap where the heel fork tines are. I'm going to raise these two together, and then raise these two together, and then lower these two together for the beginning of the increases. Those two were done together. Now we have singles. Okay, it's not really settling down. At this point, it's a little more practical to use hands to hold down because you actually have a pocket here. You actually have something to push down on. So I do a lot of that on my heels and toes after the decreases are done. When the increases are well underway, I use my hands to hold down. I don't think it really replaces getting a good situation for these heel fork tines, but it helps. Okay, so this got stuck on a needle, and I'm glad I caught it. So I think that can happen a little easier when you're using your hand like I am and rounding around my wrist. I think that can actually cause problems. So you have to be a little careful of how your own actions can interfere with the yarn, or in this case, the Lycra. So there it is there, it's stuck again. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have the Lycra stuck on a needle, but it would be bad for the yarn itself to be stuck on the needle. This is our last singleton on the left. We have two more needles, the one on the right, and here's the one on the left that we would ordinarily do one, crank a row, lower, and crank a row and end at 6. But because this is the last row of a toe, we lower them together, both of them at the half knit position, and we crank them together, and this will be our last round. This allows you to leave reserve space to hand knit a row of Kitchener grafting, to be able to graft. So by ending it the way I did, it's a very practical way of making it so that you have space for this row of grafting. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if you ended it over here and added another row of the grafting. That wouldn't be the worst, but this is, I think, how I was taught and how I like to do it. So I take some scissors now and I figure about 18 inches, which is way up here at the top of the yarn topper. I have about 18 inches of yarn that I will use for grafting. Stuff it down there where it's safe, and I start a row or several rows of waste yarn. So the waste yarn needs to start on whatever the first needle south of the halfway mark is. So if this is 1 to 36, this must be needle number 37. I don't know. Okay, so it's easy for that not to catch. So I always make sure that this yellow yarn catches that first needle south of my halfway mark. I get it started, and then of course we've got to get these back in work. And by using my fingers and checking the latches, I'm pretty sure they're pretty good. You get good at this. You get really good at using your fingertips to see if those are all as sharp as they should be. In other words, there's no latch that's closed, because that would drop it. Okay, so we're pretty good. I don't need my counter. I don't need the heel spring on. Now I'm going to crank around. You can see easily there's a hole here, and you can't see there's one here. This hole is a very good built-in landmark for us when we sit down of an evening to do grafting. I can use this hole as my landmark for north and south. So that stitch will be grafted to that stitch, and that stitch will be grafted to that stitch with the Kitchener. So I like to point out that it looks hideous. Nobody likes holes in their knitting, but that one hole and this one over here that you can't see are very good landmarks, and they close up once you start Kitchenering. So I think it's a win-win situation. Okay, that's plenty of yarn. Snip. And now I remove all the weights, and we'll take it off the machine. Okay. My weight stack here. I'll hang it up over where it has a hook. Take this thing out, and then crank it off the machine. And let's check our work. This looks enormous. So my son does have, I guess, medium large feet, size 12. But this is, as it's off the machine, it looks very much longer than it will after I wash and block it. So here's our cast on. Juana's cast on, and the two out rows make it kind of a rolled appearance, which I really love. I did 24 of these rows, which is odd, but that works okay for me. That's 24 one by one. I swapped out some of the ribbon needles to get a 3 by 1. I swapped out the, no, I guess it would be the needles in front, because this is how it was sitting on the machine. I swapped out all the front ribbon needles so that I could get a stockinette pre-heel in the back of the foot. And I kept those out, of course, for the foot, because nobody wants to walk on ridges. And I left several in on top of the foot for better fit, a little stretchier. So the heel looks really good. And this toe looks really good. There's those holes, which will help me identify which stitches to graft at the edge. So the only other thing I guess I can show is when I use ravel cord, I make it very secure, and I pay a tiny price for that when I make sure needle number 1 gets the beginning and end of the ravel cord, and the beginning and end, or the beginning, I should say, of the project yarn. That's all to say that when I do sit down and try to separate things, I need to kind of tease things out. There's a little bit of Lycra that we don't need. But anyway, so I'm teasing things off of what was needle number 1, and I don't want to undo any of my project yarn, so I kind of just take my time and kind of undo that. That tightens up, so that's the 3-inch, 4-inch tail I left right at the beginning. Everything looks good. I can Flip it over and grab a loop of this wonderful braided fishing line and pull it out easily because it's very slippery. And that is the sock without the waist yarn on it and the bonnet. I'll take this tail and I'll weave it down. I'll take it and weave it down one of these little purl stitches. It's really good. And then I'll, like I said, I'll Kitchener these stitches, graft them together. All right. Thanks for watching.